tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Namasami. It's good to see quite a few people joining us this evening. On site, in person, and presumably people also joining us via the live stream on the YouTube channel that we have. Yeah, coming together, practice together. Community. It's communal practice. Coming together, like-minded people. We know we've heard this before. We know it. That's why we're in this room, because we all see the value of communal practice. So Māgha Pūjā is often referred to as Sangha Day in English, using a Pali word and an English word. There's a few days that stand out in our monastic calendar within Buddhist tradition, and in particular the way we refer to it in the Theravada tradition. And different traditions might emphasize different days, or elevate different days as being more significant than others. But one way of that is quite traditional way of looking at it is Buddha Day is the Visakha Puja, which is typically in May, the full moon of May, and that represents and commemorates the Buddha's physical birth, his full awakening, his enlightenment, and the passing away of his body, his final parinibbana, that supposedly took place all on the full moon day of May, and obviously different years, separated by those 80 years. Dhamma Day is the day that is understood to be the day that Buddha's first sermon, when he had completed walking to Sarnath and near Benares, and found his friends that he had been practicing Dhamma with before, and gave expounded the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the setting in motion the wheel of Dhamma, laying out the path with using the Four Noble Truths. So very significant. So that's considered Dhamma Day. And then Sangha Day is where we're at now, Māgha Pūjā. And so, just to give a brief history, it's always good to remind ourselves if we've heard this all umpteen times, but the way it's handed down to us in the text, in the suttas, is that 1,250 fully awakened beings, historically it says monks, gathered spontaneously around the Buddha. They came without prior arrangement or invitation, is what's been told. And the Buddha was staying in the bamboo grove in Rajgaha, present-day Rajgir, India. And so that they gathered there. This was 10 months after the Buddha's awakening. So is when it happened. And so people came, and it's in one way it's like, wow, how could so many people come from so many different places and gather together without prior arrangement. And there was no, obviously there was no electronic communications. Communication would have been very, very sparse in many ways, especially with people living spread out. However, we're told that in actual, well, probably what it was not that many groups. So there were disciples of different. They would have been students of the various first disciples of the Buddha. For instance, the Kassapa brothers, the Venerable Kassapa brothers, who had previously been the fire worshippers, and so 1,000 of them were enlightened, achieved full awakening when they heard the fire sermon. So that was still, apparently a group or 2 or 3 groups within that. And then also students of Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Mahamoggallana, people like that. So it wouldn't have been so difficult. So if those groups were still together, that for them to be traveling together and coming together, so it wouldn't be just 2 coming from here and 5 coming from there necessarily. So regardless, because we're not entirely sure, but regardless, is that a lot of people gathered around the Buddha that night. And he, or that day and that night, and however long that gathering was, and it was at that time that he was offering teachings. And one particular teaching which stands out is the central teaching that he apparently offered. It's called the Ovada Patimokkha. Now, Ovada is a word that means sort of encouragement. It can also mean admonition, but that's one way of thinking of it. But it was more, I like to think more of encouragement, to get people, thinking, reflecting, considering. And Patimokkha is also the word that's used for like the recitation of our monastic code. And so at this time, we understand there was no sort of rule book or rules set down. The Buddha actually didn't put down rules until occasions made it necessary. So he didn't sit down, okay, I've got a Sangha now, I have this group of people, now I'm going to sit down and make rules. No, that's not the way it happened. And we're not entirely sure how long it did take to establish all of the 227 precepts, but it took probably quite a while. What I'll do is I'll read in English, I'll read a translation of the Ovada Patimokkha, just to lay it out. So, not doing any evil, to be committed to the good, to purify one's mind. These are the teachings of all Buddhas. Patient endurance is the highest practice, burning out defilements. The Buddhas say Nibbana is supreme. Not a renunciant is one who injures others. Whoever troubles others can't be called a monk. Not to insult and not to injure. To live restrained by training rules. Knowing one's measure at the meal. Retreating to a lonely place. Devotion to the higher mind. These are the teachings of all Buddhas. So it's not very long, is it? And in some ways, one can look at it and say, well, you've got 1,250 arahants, fully awakened beings, wouldn't they kind of know all of that stuff already? Why is there's this amazing gathering there, and Buddha's giving these very simple encouragement. So I don't know the answer. It's just, I leave that as a question. But there's a lot there, when we unpack that. Just that, saying maybe it was just really distilling it down to those real bare essentials. This is a samana, a religious seeker. This is the heart of it. So that teaching was offered on that day, that evening. So tonight we're coming together, commemorating this, and we hold this as a very, very important point on our calendar, a very important day. Nearly half of our community here, our monastic community, is on solitary retreat, and and not needing to attend anything, but because of the weight and the importance of this evening, that we've all come out of our retreat to gather together for this evening and to mark this. But what does it all mean? I mean, are we here just to kind of hear the history about Māgha Pūjā? Are we here to just kind of say, oh yeah, I remember this, and just commemorate it? Or are we going to use the evening to reinvigorate and refresh our practice? Are we going to use this to actually reflect on the deeper meaning? And I would suggest that, so if it is, okay, Sangha coming together, which it was, Sangha coming together tonight, so what about Sangha? So the word Sangha itself, typically in Theravada, the way I understand it, the way I've learned it, the way I practice it, is that it refers to the ordained Sangha. Now the word, especially in the West, is often used in a much broader sense as people who practice, follow Buddha's teachings and practices based on his teachings, so that could be anybody. So that's fair enough that if people want to use it that way. The word Sangha itself is more just like a grouping. Apparently the word could even be used historically, because this was a word, probably was fairly common in the common vernacular at the time. It could even use, apparently, the Sangha of animals. You use like a group, a cluster, a gathering of animals. But yeah, typically, as I said, it's used as the monastic Sangha. So whichever way we want to hold it, that's fine. But just as long as we're clear that there are various ways. Now, whichever way we're considering it, what is the value of Sangha? What is ask the question, is there a benefit? Is there a personal benefit? Do we find it helpful? What is it about community? Oftentimes, if translations from the Pali language into English, I know some translations that whenever the word Sangha was used, or almost whenever, is it the translator would just write community, but use a capital C, because typically the Sangha would be capitalized. And so it would say the community. And so how do we utilize community? Can we derive benefit from community? Can we benefit community? And so it's not just a one way, what can I get out of Sangha, what can I get out of community? But what can I also contribute? What can we contribute? Because, to be part of community means, are we just going to sort of sit back and benefit? I'll leave that as an open question. Obviously, I'm saying that in a way which would encourage us to be part of a community. We are part of a community. Even if we live out, in a little cottage way out in the middle of nowhere, even if we're living in a monastery like this on the edge of a very small village, even a lot of the local people who've lived here for 40 years don't even know we're here. They're amazed when they find out that we're here. And yet we're part of the community. We're part of the community. We're living on this island which is called the United Kingdom, in England, and Scotland, and all these places, Wales. So whether we consider ourselves part of the community or communal, we are. We're not just living on our own, whether we live in the monastery or out of the monastery. Now, contributing, so that there's a back and forth flow, benefiting from contributing. Because I think we all get it when we give. The heart, how the heart benefits when we give, when we engage. And does that mean we all give the same? No. And does that mean giving is just sort of singular ways or a very narrow way of giving? I would suggest not. There's so many different ways that we can give of ourselves. So, for instance, this evening, some people reestablished themselves in the precepts. This is considered a great gift. And the Buddha reflected on this, the gift of living by precepts. I mean, and the good karma, the good karma, the good results from living in a harmless, honest way, in a very clear way. And the Buddha equated this, would refer to this sometimes as abhaya dana, which means the gift of fearlessness. Abhaya means fearless. Dana means to give, that offering. So the offering of fearlessness, so that if we're living in a good way, ethical, morally sound, we've got a really, our moral, our ethical compass is really pointing true and straight, not deviating. This is a great gift to others and ourselves. It's a gift to everybody, every living being. This is a gift. So even just living, if living in a community, if that's all we're able to do at that time is just follow our precepts. Like, let's say maybe we're not well, maybe we're not well enough to help out in practical ways, because helping out in a practical way is only one way of offering and engaging. The gift of attention, paying attention to people, giving people, lending people ear, letting people, maybe they need to share something with us, or maybe they need to just be with somebody without necessarily talking or engaging, but just being present for other people. This is a great gift. This is a way of communing, living in community. And then, of course, as I mentioned the practical side, and then there's material, obviously material gifts if we have material things to offer. So just to broaden out that scope of because oftentimes when we hear the word offering, it can maybe too readily some of us, and I know I've fallen into this before, especially in the past, and just saying, I have nothing to offer, but we do. We have a lot to offer without even having anything material. We have a lot to offer as a human being. Now, living in a community, especially a community like this, where it's a very intentional, very focused reason why we're here. So for the ordained community, the community that has actually taken on very formally the precepts, the anagarika precepts, 8 precepts, the samanera, novice precepts, the sila dara precepts, and the bhikkhu precepts. Especially in particular in the bhikkhu upasampada, bhikkhu ordination ceremony, to cross over all dukkha, to realize nibbana. That's the reason we're doing it. And I would suggest that, in fact, that's probably why everybody's joined the monastic community. I can't speak for other people, but that to cross over all dukkha and realize nibbana, full awakening, full, utter peace, unshakable peace. And so living in community, there's different ways, there's different expressions of a monastic life, as my teacher has pointed out, one of my teachers. At the time of the Buddha, there were people, monks and nuns, living more solitary, maybe in very small groups, or sometimes maybe in solitude. But there was also, before too long, especially during the rainy season, the summer monsoon season, when the rules got established that the monks and nuns should live in one place for those 3 months, real communities started to establish themselves. And then what we understand is they became more 12-month communities, so more long-lasting or quote-unquote permanent communities. Now, living in community, we all have different experiences of it. This is a fairly good-sized community. You know, when we put together the monastic community right now, I think we're 20. I think there's 19 or 20 of us, 20, 21 maybe. And we've got about 10 lay residents here, 10 or 11. So it's usually between 30 and 35 people living here. And in terms of how much space we have, it's not very many people. But it's a big family. And living in community, especially with the way we're living, in some ways there's an intensity, I would suggest. It can be sometimes a little bit of a pressure cooker, especially when we're living with a lot of precepts. There's a lot of, especially for the monastic community, there's a lot of routine, a lot of form. There's a lot of form, as you can see. The way we dress, the way we bow, the way we sit, everything, and the nitty-gritty of not just the precepts, but also the community standards, all the little just community rules that were not established by the Buddha, but they're the sort of house rules. And so there's a lot of do's and don'ts. And we're all going to have a different experience of that and a different relationship to it. But we all asked to be here. We all asked to be here. And our, I've been reflecting on this quite a lot lately, is that like it or not, and whether we like certain rules or don't like certain rules, or like a lot of form or don't like a lot of form, is not the point. The point is to use the situation, to utilize our what I feel is a great privilege to be able to live like this. That's a personal opinion, but I do really feel that it's a privilege to be able to be supported so that we can be in this monastery, and by us being here, we're making it available for any human being to walk in that driveway, drive in the driveway, come here and practice with us. And so a monastery is made of people, and it's made of monks and nuns, and I'm so glad to be part of a tradition that shares what we have. This is what was so shocking about the pandemic when we closed the monastery. This is really just like, we just don't close. It's just not, just doesn't compute, really, to not let people in, because typically when we share, it is part of the greater community. So going back to this theme of, what are we going to do with this opportunity? What are we doing with it? What are the benefits, and what are we offering? How are we engaging with it? So the Buddha, he laid down the Ovada Patimokkha, and once again, speaking that, being committed to good, purify one's minds, developing patience, to not injure or trouble other people, to be easy to support, easy to live with, not insulting, to be not just living by the training rules, but it says here, to be restrained by the training rules. Because the training rules, we're not just trying to develop, precepts, whether it's 5 precepts, 8, 10, whatever precepts we're living on. It's not just to become a good rule keeper, to be good at keeping the rules, and just you can almost become just institutionalized and just be good at. But if we're not using using that restraint to see the heart and the mind, because that's where we suffer. That's where dukkha is. Yeah, bodily pain, that's normal, and also just the pain of receiving bad news, or there's the vicissitudes of life. Things happen that are just unpleasant. So there is that pain of hearing, finding something out or having something experienced. There's emotional pain, and that's human. That's human. Physical pain, of course, and nobody dodges these things. But it's that dukkha, that non-acceptance, that sense of lack, that sense of having to put things straight before we're okay. And so through restraint, through using all the various practices that we have been handed down to us and developed over the years, to be able to see, to really work on our inner world and not just become institutionalized and sort of, even living outside and just, whether we're inside, outside, let's take away the difference. There is a difference, but for the moment, let's just lay that aside and just really to utilize these teachings. These are reflective teachings, and using the precepts, it really puts us into a very safe container. Safe in the sense that it doesn't mean that nothing's going to happen to us in terms of worldly dangers. No, that's not it. But it's safe in terms of guarding our karma. So karma means action in our tradition, and then by extension, the results of those actions. And by living in a restraint, ethical way, we're not creating negative karma or results of negative actions, because without an intentional negative and unwholesome action, without that, then there won't be a negative result. There won't be, because there was no unskillful intention. Now that's protection. That's protection. That will protect us. Because then no matter what happens to us in life, in our heart, we know that we've lived well, we've done our best. So utilizing that, so then using those precepts, but also communally, and then that ripple effect of how, here again, that gift of fearlessness that I spoke about earlier in this reflection, gift of fearlessness that we're offering to be able to live together with each other with trust. With everybody that's living here in the monastery, I always know that I can just leave things. I don't have to worry about leaving my phone on the table or anything like that. Leaving things. I don't even think about it, because it just doesn't enter the mind that somebody living here would act that way. And if and when that ever does happen, that somebody acts inappropriately, and it's possible, and occasionally it happens, right? But I've spoken about this with some friends, some Dhamma friends, and I said I'd rather live in a perpetual state of trust and have things occasionally go wrong than to live in perpetual distrust and have things go occasionally wrong. Right? I'd rather have that just on those occasions when go, wow, okay, duly noted that somebody acted in a distrustful way. But to live I'm speaking personally, obviously here, but I'm offering this as a reflection. Do we want to live in a perpetual state of distrust? Now, does that mean we're never afraid? Of course not. Of course not. There are things to be afraid of. There are things to be attentive to. Doesn't mean we just, lay back and just, I trust the universe and stuff. No, be attentive, and when things change in a way that tweaks things, kind of perks up our ears in terms of a potential danger of any sort. Yeah, be attentive. keep your eyes open, whether that's, from an animal or a human or a storm. If it's stormy, be attentive. There's danger there. So using the precepts and so is really, really creates this foundation. And then when we're living in that way, the main benefit or one of the main benefits spoken about is, wow, the sense of regret and remorse that drops away. How does that feel? What does that do to the heart and the mind? So that when we do sit down and meditate, we're not just dwelling in remorse, dwelling in regret, feeling bad about what we've said or done. Then there's no turmoil from that, then the other stuff that we should possibly be looking at or potentially could be looking at, habitual things, habitual ways of thinking, habitual ways of reacting, of operating, of communicating with people, all the more subtle things, we're able to actually see those more clearly, because the things that I mentioned earlier, like regret and remorse, just aren't there. Because what we really need to transcend and to realize is those deep-rooted things, the stuff that is more subtle. And so, living like this, also living a very much simpler life, not just in the monastery, but a lot of people who take up Buddhist practice. Some people have also said, "Well, I can simplify my life," because the Buddhist teachings are pointing towards simplification, to make things more simple. So Sangha, community, using community life like this. I mean, and I'm just touching on just a very few things, because it's such a broad-ranging topic. There's so much nuance as well. Just before closing, because I know when meeting a lot of people, a lot of meditators, because I've been meditating for a little over 30 years now, and most of the people that I meet, because of living this life, I was 10 years as a lay person, meeting a lot more lay meditators, lay practitioners, and now I'm meeting a real mixture of both monastic and lay practitioners. But those first 10 years in lay life, even though I'd picked up the precepts, 5 precepts, very early on, meeting a lot of people that who didn't, and also what I read, what I hear, is that I really do support this idea that we really need to integrate that ethical side of practice into our lives. Really, it's that as it is, as often the image that's given is that the Dhamma and Vinaya, so the teachings and then the precepts, if we want to think of it that way, they support one another, like two wheat sheaves in the field that have been harvested and tied up in bundles and leaning against each other. That image that they support one another. If you take one away, the other one falls down. So if you've only got Dhamma and no Vinaya, and if you only have Vinaya and no Dhamma. And earlier, as I was mentioning, if we're just becoming a bunch of rule keepers, but not using the teachings, where are we? Yeah, good karma, as I mentioned. Or if we're only using Dhamma, but there's no Vinaya, and this is where, especially in certain circles where it's kind of fallen flat, where people are maybe going along to all the meditations, but that their personal lives or their communal lives are being operated, they're being lived in an unethical way, and it falls apart. It's not peaceful. It's not transcending suffering. It's actually creating suffering, typically. So for us to really consider this, and to, here again, whether we're in the monastery, out of the monastery, it doesn't matter. We need to really consider this Dhamma Vinaya, so that there's balance. There's a balance there, and so as I was mentioning earlier today, in an earlier setting, whether it was this morning after the Patimokkha or at the meal, I can't remember now, but for us to really be reflecting on Dhamma, no matter how many times we hear it, because I know, sometimes you maybe hear the topic of a talk that's going to be given, we think we might, we've heard this before, but not let ourselves fall into that trap. We may have heard it before, but are we following it? I often ask myself that question: am I actually doing it? Yeah, of course we've heard the Four Noble Truths teachings, and all of of course we've heard our precepts, and of course but just really refresh it, keep refreshing our practice, or just not letting it fall into staleness. To not take things for granted, to not become complacent. Because it's not about knowledge around, it's just knowing precepts and knowing the teachings, but here again, I am intentionally using this word for an umpteenth time, really reflecting on the teachings, using them the way they were meant to be, using the teachings for how they were laid out, using the precepts. And for those of us, tonight, this is our community right here. Tonight, this is a coming together. So using the communal situation, liking or disliking, let's transcend either. Let's transcend both of those, and just to utilize what we've got. And this really amazing teachings which have created this opportunity that we have tonight. Because that's what it is an opportunity. And this is a very it's a very adult practice. It might sound funny, but it's up to us what we do with it. Nobody can do it for us. I mean, what's handed down to us is that even the Buddha couldn't enlighten other people. He couldn't. Even some of his closest disciples didn't realize Nibbana. Couldn't. He says, I can't do it for you. We've got to do it. And so we're getting the information, we have the information. Let's not become complacent. Let's not forget. So I'll offer that for reflection this evening.